let's get into this conversation now as the war rages on in the Middle East, with Israel intensifying its bombardment on Lebanon. The UN Chief António Guterres has warned that the situation is going to escalate. South Africa took a decision to go to the International Criminal Court, in fact, with the aim to ensure that the conflict doesn't escalate now, as the new Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, has reached the 100-day mark. We'll take a look at some important issues in his portfolio, and he joins us in studio now. And of course, we'll get to the ICJ in just a moment, but it's been 100 days. How are you finding it?
It's exciting and challenging at the same time. And we have arrived with very good sentiments from the international community, looking at how South Africa has held its last elections, the general elections, how all parties agreed to form a government of national unity is seen as an example of democracy across the globe. And this could further bring positive sentiments, even in terms of investment into the country.
There are some who believe that the GNU won't last. What do you say?
I'm also not a prophet, but I think with the work that we've been doing with some members from other parties who are cabinet ministers, there is a positive outlook of stability in the government of national unity. You'll be aware, I went to China with some in the US, in the UK, and we've been working very well. All of us as salesmen of South Africa, the Deputy President was calling us salespeople, and we were all speaking in one voice. And in the US also, we were also speaking in one voice. We were with the president, and we sold South Africa as a country of stability, of a maturing democracy, of a democracy that is ready to reap the dividends of investment from the international community. And
you speak about yourselves as salesmen, of course, to put up a pitch for South Africa, of course, as you were mentioning, how all of it was going. But I'm keen to hear from your vantage point. When you look at New York, you look at London, and every other trip that you've had to undertake, including China, as the ministers, your personal takeaways for South Africa?
The personal takeaway is the positive sentiment by the international community, ready to inject foreign direct investment into the country. And some of them are believing that this could lead to a level of economic growth that can help us to achieve and to create jobs. And also on engagement on various issues of geopolitics, face-to-face with our counterparts in these capitals has made them also understand our positions with regards to Gaza. They may not agree with us, some disagree, but in a respectful way. But they understood the human rights outlook of the South African government. And in all these places, they all understand that this government that is continuing to work is still respect the Constitution, the rule of law, and South Africa is ready to participate in platforms of the international community.
Is it the same within the Government of National Unity? You speak about the varying of views and the respect for different views, because we've seen, during the elections and in the lead up to the elections, the different political parties that were talking about, the different policy stance, especially when it comes to what is taking place in the Middle East. Are you also finding that within the Government of National Unity, you are able to speak in one voice on the issues in the Middle East?
Yes, we're able to speak in one voice, but behind closed doors, we engage each other robustly on this and what is in the national interest. And we all agree that all our positions in this regard are foregrounded on the national interest document of the South African government, are foregrounded on the Constitution, which is what brings all of us together. And that's why we could be able to speak in one voice in China, in the UK, in the US, and it is for that reason of the respect of the Constitution, the various policy documents of the South African government, that I believe that the GNU will be able to run its course.
The situation is escalating in the Middle East, and I wonder what is the position of South Africa?
We have always called for the de-escalation of the conflict. Firstly, cessation of hostilities in Gaza, and also now, as it moves to Lebanon, we also call for the de-escalation of the conflict, particularly by Israel and all the parties involved in the space in line with the United Nations position, which is a guiding tool to all member states of the UN in responding and resolving to this conflict, that everyone must respect the UN Security Council resolutions, must respect the call by the Secretary General that must lead us to a long-lasting peace, particularly the two-state solution in Gaza and Palestine.
You come with, of course, the issue of the ICJ. You were Justice Minister when this issue began, and then now in the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. Last month, there was, of course, talk of South Africa filing that memorial. How far are we with that?
We will file the memorial at the end of the month, and we will be able to show to the court and prove that indeed genocide is being committed. As you are aware, the first phase of the case related to the provisional measures and interim order in relation to the ceasefire and so forth. Now we have to prove that indeed there is genocide, because the provisional order said there is plausible genocide. Now we need to see in actual fact is there, and we believe our memorial and the evidence that we will submit will be able to prove that.
When it comes to the countries that are supporting South Africa, are you seeing an increase in the numbers?
Yes, there is a lot of countries that have supported from both the north and even in the northern hemisphere, in the south, countries like Spain, Ireland. So there is a lot of countries that are supporting, and we see this as important in conscientizing and helping the court to arrive at a very good decision.
There are some, of course, those who are not in support, who are saying that the issue of the hostages is still not being addressed adequately enough, and they still feel that those who are, pushing and supporting the case with South Africa are simply not doing enough to push this issue of hostages. How do you respond to those?
It is in our documents, as you will remember, in the provisional indication order. It was part of the court order that the hostages must be released. We continue to call for them to be released. The president in the UN General Assembly also did the same, and in various platforms of that. So we have been vocal, and we call for them to be released. We call for the ceasefire. We call for humanitarian access. It's a comprehensive input when it comes to that, which includes the hostages, and that is not starting now. Even when we went to the ICJ for the first time, we always called for the release of the hostages.
There is that adopted Pact for the Future at the back of the UN General Assembly, and it seeks to ensure that this is a body that now responds to global challenges in a manner that is more effective, more responding to the challenges of the day, because we know the criticism that this institution has faced because wars continue to rage. Do you think that this particular pact is the answer that the world needs right now, and could we see expedited action as far as it's concerned?
Yes, it is groundbreaking, revolutionary, and innovative in all respects in relations to the UN, in relations to what the world can agree to about the future, because it deals with a number of issues, not only the reform of the Security Council, which we agree with. It must evolve. By the time the Security Council was adopted years ago, many of the African countries were still colonies. Now we are governing ourselves. There is a reality that must be factored into the Security Council. And the issues of climate change that are part of the Pact of the Future. Climate change financing, which it shows in the report, that less than 3% of climate change financing goes into the global south or the African continent, which is mostly affected by climate change. So this is not enough. Issues of the financial architecture of the institutions of global finance, financing for development, this disproportionate funding of a military operation aid rather than development. So the Pact of the Future is groundbreaking, and we support it, and that's why we believe it will be able to reverse this type of financing for development, to have more for development for the African continent with regards to climate change, and also put us into the mainstream of discussion when it comes to artificial intelligence, because that pact also deals with that. It also a report of the Secretary General dealing with issues of critical minerals. So It's wide-ranging and revolutionary.
Before we get to the G20, there is a view for some who are saying that what is taking place in the Middle East seems to now be overtaking the crisis that is also unfolding in Sudan. What do you say?
Yes, and it's a huge concern for us that that is being not getting the same spotlight. Hence, we raised it at the Security Council, and we raised it in the various platforms that we get, including at the African Union, that we need to put a spotlight and focus to find long-lasting solution in Sudan, because this is the biggest, according to the UN Secretary General, humanitarian crisis facing the world as we are seated here. So we must, all of us as humanity, put efforts to find peace in that place, and we will continue to do so through the platforms of the AU and the UN.
South Africa is preparing to take up presidency of the G20. How much work has been done in that regard so far?
Indeed, that is another exciting moment for our country, which is the biggest national plan or project that the country has ever faced after the 2010 World Cup. So it will need the whole of South Africa to rally behind it. And we are beginning with our preparations, putting all the work streams, looking at all the places that will be able to host across the country, and even the messaging, including the issues of priorities. What will be the priorities? And in regard to priorities, it will be issues of climate financing, climate change, the issues of the reform of the global architecture, the issues of related to food security, issues related also to artificial intelligence, its governance, and there's also a number of issues that will be covered by our hosting of the G20. And obviously, we will also have to be biased towards Agenda 2063 of the African Union. So this is a huge opportunity for South Africa to showcase itself, our beautiful landscape, but also to shine a spotlight on the issues of financing for the African continent, so that we also push for the development of, for the financial development in the African continent. As I said earlier, it is not enough.
There is a view, though, and I wonder how do you begin to contend with this going into the consultative meeting with the AU as well before this G20 summit. There is a view that says that while you talk about development, while you talk about the growth of Africa, there is the concern that most African leaders, if not some, are only concerned about winning the elections. They're only concerned about staying in power. They're not concerned about what is development. How does the continent begin to deal with infrastructure challenges? How does it begin to deal with what you're raising, which is the issue of food security? Because some of them don't even think beyond winning the elections. There are some analysts who hold that view. How then do you begin to ensure that this is addressed as you're speaking to the AU in this meeting?
Yeah, hence, we will put a spotlight on the issues of development, the issues of financing Agenda 2063. And the AU, as you will be aware, is also a member of the G20 itself. And it also has its own agenda, issues of focus, including issues of strengthening governance in each member state of the AU, which the AU continuously contend with and deal with. So that is the platform where such issues of governance are dealt with, at the platform of the AU, and we also participate there. But we will focus through our G20 to ensure that we deal with the structural challenges in the global financing institutions that must respond to the disproportionate or unequal or uneven distribution of resources into the African continent by various multilateral institutions, including issues of climate change, as I have raised. The African, sub-Saharan Africa is one of the most affected. Already people in South Africa can feel the effects of climate change. So we have to focus on that, and we believe we can mobilize South Africans and the whole of the continent to respond to these issues, and we address them.
It's one thing to unlock the financing. It's one thing to deal with the issue of the structure when it comes to financing, but how then, what approach are you taking with the AU in this consultative meeting tomorrow to ensure that everything you talk about filters through to the people who live on this continent? Because ultimately, both being members, it's still an approach that you need to take, a much more slanted approach towards the African continent. So how do you ensure that it doesn't remain talk, but the people of Africa actually feel what you are talking about?
South Africa has engaged, obviously, in the platform of the AU to develop its agenda and to ensure that the outcomes filter through in the member states, in the AU itself. And that is why we participated in the Ghana executive meeting to engage and make our input into that strategy of the AU. And the AU will still make its own input now as we go to Brazil. There is an input by the AU in terms of that, and it will do the same as it comes to South Africa. And we will also action the Pact of the Future, as you alluded to earlier, as a platform to socialize it, to action it, and make it a living reality in South Africa and also in the platforms of the AU.
All right, Minister, thank you so much for stopping by. I appreciate it.
Thank
you know,
you.
we always have people on Teams, so it's good to have you in studio. So thank you so much for coming. And certainly we'll look to see then what comes out of this consultative meeting and also the processes going forward. But do appreciate your time. That was the Minister of International Relations, Ronald Lamola.